Hello there! I hope you're having a wonderful day, just like yourself, because in today's video, I'm gonna be discussing about what I believe to be by far one of the biggest issues for players below 1500, which is, you guessed it, tunnel visioning. What do I mean by tunnel visioning? Well, let's take the hypothetical scenario that the chess boom is over, okay? And you need to look for a new job, and for some reason you decided to start robbing houses. Alright? You go into your first robbery, the adrenaline starts to kick in, you realize that the door is closed, and then you freak out. And because you freak out, you don't even realize that the neighbor has left his windows opened, okay? Just because, as in chess, sometimes you see a juicy square or a juicy pawn, that often leads to you missing a lot of juicy opportunities. Are you confused? Let me show you what I mean. This position has arrived in the first game that I'm gonna be showing you. And okay, pause for a few seconds, try to get familiar with the main squares, the main weaknesses. I think for most people it's quite obvious that white has these double isolated pawns, and moves like bishop c5 or the fianchetto should be considered. However, with a little bit of experience and a body count higher than 0, you will be able to find the better plan that I did in the game. I know that sounds very exciting, so without further introduction, let's dive right into the games. Alright. Gonna be going for another Caro-Kann game, and we're gonna go for d5. And my opponent immediately plays the advance. Okay, interesting. Now, against the advance, you can pretty much play two things. You can stick with the standard move bishop to f5, which is interesting, but it requires a lot more knowledge than what I believe to be the best move for people below 2000 by far, which is c5, the Bulfinicals variation. We're going to be playing c5, and the point behind this variation is to just try and get an improved version of the French defense. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm gonna play knight c6, and I am expecting mainly knight f3 or bishop to b5. Okay, those are the two main options. Now, against bishop b5, it's gonna be a little bit trickier. I'm gonna show you the best way to play in a second. But on knight f3, this goes to show the typical case of the improved French, because you would have had the option of playing bishop to g4, pinning the knight. Now, a normal French would look like knight f3 and then pawn to e6. And oftentimes in the French, the bishop ends up being quite problematic because it's trapped inside the pawn chain like a butterfly inside the jar. So it's just not gonna do a lot of work. Now, on bishop to b5, however, if you try to play standard with bishop to f5, developing, well, you can actually lose on the spot. Because bishop to b5 comes with a hidden threat, pinning the knight while threatening dc. So the best move to deal with that is actually to play queen a5. Okay, pretty weird, I know, but it is the best move and it works very well. And it's just so profitable to invest your effort in learning this. Because bishop to b5 is very common. Up to like 1700, and you're gonna see that a lot. And the main reason why queen a5 is actually so strong is that not only puts pressure on the bishop, defends the pawn, but also you can play this cd4 move and notice that they're unable to play the ideal cd. And on knight takes d4, you have many moves. You can play c5, but you can play d7 as well. But my favorite way of doing so is by defending with the queen and also stopping from castling. I do think this move is quite annoying for the white players, and they need to be very precise just to keep things equal, which I don't think they normally do. Like, they need to come up with not developing these pieces, but start a4, b4, b5. Like, literally. That is all the computer plays. Now, bishop to e3, of course, is not that great of a move for my opponent.
However, I do believe it's still premature to go c5 because after knight b3, both pawns will be hanging. So I'm going to start e6 and then maybe idea to push c5. Now, you may be wondering, okay, I'll take advance there, but you just told us a second ago, try to get an active bishop. Well, yes, but you need to realize that the bishop always has opportunity to activate this way. So my opponent plays something that's quite common. He plays queen e2, simply gasping for air, simply wanting to get castle eventually and live a normal life. Okay, I'm gonna take and I'm gonna give him the normal life. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's actually what he wants. I can play c5, stop knight d4. I can play bishop a6, pin the knight in a way, still stopping him from castling. Now, the only kind of drawback with bishop a6 is that ideally I would have the pawn to a5 first and then bishop a6, just so that, you know, we could push all the way to a4 and then rook b8 to pressure the pawn, stop b3. That's a typical way to put pressure on the queen side. On the other hand, knight e7, knight f5 is also juicy. Like knight e7, knight d4 may be the problem. Many tempting options. Hard to choose, really. Okay, I think I'm gonna do a5 and I'm gonna do something cheeky. Are you ready to be cheeky? Because my plan was to mate knight d4 with king d7 and then keep going bishop a6. So yeah, now knight e7, and if knight d4, I'm gonna be cheeky. Okay, he's just being careless right now. Knight e7, clearly threatening to go knight f5 after his bishop. He just plays fast move, not caring about my intentions. We get active knight for free. Typical mistake done there by my opponent. He could have avoided that by playing knight d4. I mean, still, it's not like he is doing so well. Like I could do king d7 or maybe, I cannot draw arrows really on my laptop. But yeah, I could do something like that with pretty good position, but definitely now we are getting close to winning. Some of you may be surprised by that assessment, but especially when he goes rook d1, allowing me to take and then giving him doubled isolated pawns. This has to be bad, okay? This has to be bad, okay? Double isolated pawns. It's like putting pineapple on pizza. This cannot really work, right? Can it? Okay, can we take on e2? And then bishop c5, because if I do bishop c5 right away, he wants knight d4. Okay, maybe it's not so simple. Maybe we shouldn't rush. Now, I could try to focus on the e5 pawn by doing g6, bishop g7. I don't have to like rush at all. But on the other hand, if I'm not taking, I feel like he may play something like knight f4 and then the bishop remains a little bit out of the game. Let's say, if he gets to play knight f4, God didn't put this bishop 100% there, okay? It would be a little bit teased out, so I'm just gonna take. I'm just gonna be taking, and then, I don't know, should we play bishop c5 or just g6, bishop g7? I'm gonna stay flexy. I'm gonna play a4, which is a typical move regardless, and I'm just gonna be preparing play rook to b8. Like maybe rook b8 now, yeah. Giving a kiss onto the pawn. You know, like they say in snooker, when you like barely touch a ball, we're doing a little kiss on the b2 pawn. That's what we're doing. We're little pawn kissers. Okay, nothing weird with that. Gonna take on b3. And by the way, that was a move. Okay, we went for the little en passant, and he has to take like that. Bishop c5 or castle. I mean, bishop c5 with castle or g6. Yeah, I feel like g6 is the move. If he goes there, we have many good moves. This is simplest, but I feel like this can be even better. Remember to always look for a counter-attack first before you, let's say, make the passive move, like rook to b7. So yeah, now I'm able to castle, I managed to trick him with that, ready to play bishop g7. And what is actually so important and vital to understand is that with a4 rook b8, we have created a weakness. So the knight has to babysit the pawn, and the knight can no longer defend e5, because the pawn will no longer be babysitted. So yeah, we just completely gives up on it, and now the endgame is completely winning. We managed to create a second weakness. It's called a little concept that's vital to understand. In order to win such endgames, it's very often not enough to play for only one pawn weakness. Therefore, you need to create a second one, then slowly juggle with these weaknesses. Okay, here, opponent may honestly have other weaknesses other than these pawns at this point, but we'll keep it just related, and we're gonna be picking up b3. On the next move, I'm gonna be bringing the cannons. And okay, how many pawns do we have? 3 extra pawns. That should be a win. Once in every blue moon. Now with 4 pawns, things are getting even better. And okay, and remember to always activate your last piece. Rook on f8 wasn't really doing a whole lot, so time to use it. And okay, I'm just gonna play this. So we are prioritizing exchanges. Whenever you have such rook endgame with 2 rooks on the board, in order to avoid any chance of counterplay whatsoever, you just wanna make sure you trade a pair of rooks, otherwise there won't be any perpetual. Like, take a scenario like this: you play f6 and then your opponent teleports rook to d7, rook to h7. You're up a gazillion of pawns, but he will perpetual you, rook g7, and check you forever, right? So in order to avoid any kind of shenanigans, just wanna trade the rook and then it pretty much resigns. There's just not much to do afterward. And okay, gonna get these pawns kind of like nicely lined up. Okay, this king is getting a little bit horny over there. I'm just gonna play king g7, trying to stop him from king f6. And yeah, pretty much we just have to push them, baby. That is what, you know, you have to do what you have to do. Where the heck is that rook going? Okay, I'm gonna go rook a4, trying to just blockade him. He has no stalemate, he's got plenty of moves, and then I'm ready to promote. Also with a check, so yeah, he resigns.
Now, before we draw the main conclusions from this game, I just wanted to let you know that in the following one, we're gonna be having a killer Jobava London. And the best part about it is that it pretty much works against anything that black plays, so stay tuned for that.
Remember this key idea. Okay, this is the game changer. If you've been watching me, let's say you're getting solid opening positions, but you can't really push it for more, this is exactly the middle game stuff that will take your game to the next level, okay? Having the pawn on a4 and then rook b8, right? This pretty much just single-handedly won us the game, because just attacking e5 would have not been enough. This is where the concept of 2 weaknesses comes into play. So notice how I am just threatening to play bishop g7 next, and that just wins, because knight f3 drops the pawn. When he played rook f2, allowing this gorgeous bishop h6. He cannot take on f7 because we would have won the knight, thanks to the fork, and yeah, I had to go passive, and then I can just turn on the pawn. So once you pick up the pawn in this position, his position just collapses like a house of cards, pretty much. So yeah, remember that. More so when they play bishop to b5, the killer move, the best move by far. Very weird, but definitely important, queen a5. So with that being said, I think we can just move on to the following game. Alright everybody, back with another game with white pieces. Gonna be going for what I've been researching for the last a couple of months, pretty much extensively. I haven't really been doing much other than that. As you can see, I haven't even gotten a new haircut, just because of how much I was studying this Jobava London. So we're gonna be playing it right now. Imagine if we lose this game. It would have been much better to go for a haircut instead. But okay, main position on the board. Opponent has a bunch of alternatives. We do have bishop to f5. Okay, variety of options. e6, queen can be declined. c5, strike e in the center, go e3, have knight b5 ideas. Case of a6, yet again, e3, stay flexible, and so on. We're not gonna dive into like too much details of the theory. We're just gonna be sticking with principal play. And again, bishop to f5, precisely. Okay, you have to really remember that this triggers the domino effect. We're gonna play f3, and then it's gonna be raiding with pawns. Not sure if opponent has gotten his umbrella ready, but we know for sure that when bishop is on f5, it will start raining with pawns. And we're gonna be getting a lot of space on the king side in the meantime. And my opponent plays h6. Important to notice, in case of h5, you have to push, okay? I see way too many people just ignoring that threat. They carry on with life, like e3, allowing hg, and then your pawns are getting kind of messed up. So no, h5, you gotta push, then you gotta do e3, bishop d3. Now, here, it's most precise to play e3 and then bishop to d3, simply giving yourself an extra possibility of, let's say, later on in the game, when the rook is defended, you can play g5 and take it back with a pawn. That's why we are delaying this h5 move that I know for a fact may seem very tempting. Bishop d6, just gonna go knight h3, very important move as a rule of thumb, but when we are playing the pawn star variation, okay, f3, g4, it's the pawn star variation, you want to be able to take back on f4 with a knight, okay, and we have to play the knight on the edge here instead of knight e2 because we don't want to be blocking that light square bishop in, okay, that would not be a very happy bishop, to put it mildly. So knight h3, and on the next move we're ready to go bishop to d3. Okay, bishop d3, most likely opponent will take. On d3 I was about to say, not on f4. I wasn't expecting a 1700 rated opponent play the opening worse than a 1000. Okay, because this is pretty much gonna give us a turbo version of the Jobava line. We're gonna be getting like 5 extra tempos. Okay, not really 5, but enough to really start to tell, because after knight f4 we're threatening the bishop. The knight is pretty much on an improved square. This is pretty much like a knight on steroids, and we're gonna be playing bishop to d3. Yet again, threatening to just take and then play queen d3 castle. Would be expecting a lot of them to take. Where you just do the recap. Okay, if they don't, we take queen d3 castle, g5 break. Okay, this is very intuitive, simple plan. Okay, I'm pretty sure if you hand this opening to a chimpanzee, not only that he would beat the crap out of you in a physical fight, but after, you know, playing a few games, he may start to be pretty decent in the Jobava London. It is just this simple. So g5, booga booga, not even gonna be thinking about it much. Point is, after ag, the knight cannot take, as the rook will remain undefended. And okay, what is the hidden point of g5? Well, you pause the video and try to come up with the best move after my opponent just castled. Now, for those of you that think g takes on h6 is the best, it's a reasonable move, okay? I'm gonna give you that, but really, biggest point, you wanna really go g6 and pretty much disrupt the coordination in the enemy camp. After this move, my opponent pawn structure will be completely messed up. More important, we are undermining pretty much the iceberg on e6, okay? Targeting the rook has to move. Pawn on g6 is completely vulnerable. And yeah, okay, rook has to move. Where will the rook move? Rook e8. There will be knight g7. Am I gonna get my knight trapped? Perhaps. Should we risk and get our knight trapped for glory? You don't have to ask that. Okay, or don't have to answer that. Okay, rook e8. Maybe I'm just gonna go knight back. Maybe I'm gonna chase the glory this way, in a safer way. Okay, opponent, you don't have much to do. It's not like you will play rook g8, pretty much suffocating this rook. So I'm gonna just put my rook on 3 because I'm a 1700 from Norway that pretty much plays this game while skiing. Probably. He's gonna be taking that. I guess he had some snow on the f8 square, so didn't notice that the knight was there, and opponent resigns.
Now, before we quickly analyze what just happened in this game, I want you to get some snacks, because in the following game, we're gonna be addressing one of the most common issues that Caro-Kann players have, which is how to effectively deal with random checks on b5. But I guess you probably figured that one out by looking on the board.
What the heck are these games? This is way too easy, isn't it? Quickly popping the game review, got a solid 93. Really, not much to talk about it. Just standard procedure. Kill the guy immediately. Knight h3, bishop d3. Just following the well-established path. The long castle. Play g5, as I said initially. We really want to wait for this move. And yeah, if there's anything to take away from this, g6 is the killer blow in these positions. Okay, I get that. Taking, make it look like the pawn is kind of soft and you can somehow play for it. No. Okay, just do g6. Undermine e6, and then even if you would have played rook e8, I think I would have chickened out by playing knight f4. But at the end of the day, he has a weakness, and the computer also thinks we're still much better. So that being said, I think we can just move on to the following game. Alright everybody, back with another game. What better way to do so other than sticking with our little Caro-Kann. Okay, we're gonna be going for the Caro-Kann, facing against an opponent rated 1744. So getting games that are, let's say, in theory, a little bit more difficult, but it seems that they're still playing this kind of e5, bishop b5 type of check, which is typical for the noob lines. So yeah, in general, you can pretty much play anything against this. Knight c6 is a move. However, generally speaking, I do believe that trading the bishops and then taking with the knight is the easiest. However, my opponent decided not to take and decided that he is willing to see a 3 endgame masterpiece, because in this position, a lot of the players tend to like just blunder the b7 pawn, but in fact, you can play queen d7 solving this issue, blocking the check while also defending. So please stop doing that. Now, knight to c3. Many ways of playing this. He is, in a nutshell, threatening to take on d5. He may be threatening to play knight e5 or the next move as well. So I need to take my time a little bit, considering e6, knight e5. Let's say he kind of has to play it. I'm gonna take, and then I need to defend c7 square. I can easily do so with knight a6. So I don't really think that should be problematic. So let's see what he play. Okay, recording looks all good to me. He castled. Okay, castling. Now, any options? Knight to c6, getting a normal game, avoiding the endgame. I'm gonna play a6. I'm gonna really invite him to take. I'll be more than happy to show how to play these positions, delivering the minority attack, but indeed, yeah, he decides against it. He just decided to put his own queen in jail, basically. Queen to b3 looks a little bit suspicious, as the queen will quite likely get trapped, but we'll see about that. So it's very tempting to play knight a5. Perhaps a lot of you are considering this move. But there's a big problem because with my opponent's last move, he's creating this spin, meaning that queen takes on d5 would be a legal move. More so, a great move. So, gotta deal with that pressure. Castling long is a funny move that comes to mind, but generally, I will recommend you castle short in most of your games with the black pieces just for safety measures, okay? You know how they say it, do not try this at home. And then there is like some dangerous act performed by a professional. Similarly here, long castle, walking on thin ice. Be careful with it. However, after d3, knight a5 becomes more and more tempting. He has queen to b6, kind of as a last resource, saving that queen. Also, queen a4 is a move to kind of be aware of. But I think by playing b5, we could perhaps solve both those issues, killing two birds with one stone. How about that? b5, threatening knight a5. Hello, queen. Okay, bishop g5. My opponent is literally paying zero attention to my moves. Typical mistake, and I don't really know. Are these guys like actually 1700? Am I actually paying these people just to farm videos? Knight e5. Queen is gone. Queen was in jail. Queen will get transferred to an even higher security prison in a different dimension after knight e5. Oh man. Imagine being 1700 and losing in 12 moves with white like that. I don't know. It is just, I'm gonna blame it on the power of the Caro-Kann, okay? So, yeah. Not really much to add there. Opponent resigns.
Now, this one was pretty straightforward, and if you're still watching this video, let me assume that you somewhat like the Jobava London. But in order to truly be successful with this opening, you need to know how to deal with random breaks in the center. Just like my next opponent did.
Back with another white game. Let's go d4 and hoping to get pretty typical Jobava London, starting knight c3, hoping for knight f6. He can also play the aggressive c5 where I recommend you go for e4. That is best move, best by test. And okay, he plays a6 though. Now, I'm gonna do the Jobava move, even though you could consider e4 and just open up the position saying a6 is not super useful for my opponent. I'm just gonna try to transpose to our typical lines after knight f6, e3. So, let's see, it's kind of like very unlikely that he plays b5, and okay. Bishop to f5. On bishop to f5, we have pretty much the main moves that I'm considering. As a rule of thumb, I'm saying whenever you see bishop on f5, we can play f3. And I think I'm gonna go for that. Additionally, there's nothing wrong with e3 and then f3 on the very next move. So I'm gonna start f3. Simply, you see the bishop there, you go f3, you go g4, h4. Okay. Yeah, we are just transposing to a6, bishop f5 variation. I'm gonna go g4 and, okay. I'm booked to the teeth here. I know, like, pretty much everything first 20 moves in this kind of lines. So, yeah. Let's see what can go wrong. He goes h6. One funny blunder that happens quite often, especially in online games after h5. From this move, whether it's dubious because he can go g5, and a lot of people go knight d7, okay? Now, knight d7 is actually losing immediately, and I'll kindly ask you to pause the video and find why. Because most of the times it gets overlooked, and the pawn on d5 remains completely free. The queen no longer covers it. So h5 it's bad here, so that's why he plays h6. I'm gonna go e3 now. I'm not gonna rush to push. I just wanna keep option to do g5 and take win the pawn later on in the game. Plan is to simply prepare bishop d3 next. Expecting him to play e6. There we have it. And yeah, normally they take and then they play something like c5. Okay, expecting c5 or bishop d6. These are the main moves. Also, additionally, he could do knight c6, but it's less likely for this rating range. I would say around like 1800. They start playing c5 more often from my experience, but we'll see. Okay, bishop to d6 now. Okay, for those of you that have been watching my videos already, let's pause. What do you think is the best move? Because we do have a choice between pretty much taking knight e2, knight h3, or castling. What do you think is best? Okay, now, the rule of thumb when you're playing the pawn storm variation, okay, it has to be kind of like that wired in your brain. The pawn storm variation, okay, you want to be able to take on f4 back with a knight. But okay, this really applies only to the pawn storm variation. It does not apply in all Jobava lines, okay? Let me give you a quick example to clarify what I mean. Because I see some people get this twisted and they play it in general. So let's say you get a position like this. e6, e3, bishop d6. And I've noticed people just going for knight h3 or something like that because they think they need to take on f4 with a knight. But no, this is where you're missing the boat. Okay, it has to be in the pawn storm. I'm specifically saying like that. And that's how you want to remember it to like get the most juice out of these typical rules. Otherwise it won't work so well. So okay, knight to c6, kind of surprised by that because the knight is, I would say, a little bit misplaced. The idea is that black should be rushing to push pawns on this side, as it's pretty obvious we're gonna go long because we already committed. But with knight on c6, he's pretty much kind of shooting himself in the foot because there won't be queenside counterplay. And okay, here we have another very interesting moment. Feel free to go ahead and pause the video. Shall we push? Now that the rook is defended, okay? Yeah, don't go g5 if the rook is undefended, by the way. I still see that happening. I think g5 is reasonable. However, it may be even better to take first and then play knight f4. Because on g5, if he plays knight h6, you know, he gets to kind of stop my counterplay. You know, g5, knight h5, it's like he's plugging the champagne bottle, you know? There won't be much champagne after that. So I'm gonna take and then I'm gonna play knight f4. I'm only taking so that I can improve my knight, okay? Otherwise, you never release tension like that on d6. That would be a crime against chess. I still see that pretty often though, so you really want to watch out for that. We take so that we activate this knight, and okay, this can get pretty instructive. Hopefully I'm not gonna mess up this game, because it's a typical possession. The computer thinks it is about equal. However, yeah, my main argument is that it looks a little bit more pleasant for white, as we have this extra space and push on the king side. So yeah, I guess we'll try to do something with that. Expecting him to take, although he can also play knight d7. Knight d7, we may be just going g6, which is the typical way to continue the g5 break. Or we can pause for a little bit and think. I'm hoping he takes though, just because in most of the games you will have that structure. It's very rare that people do not take on g5. I think it makes sense for him though not to take, because if anything, we're probably going to be the ones benefiting from opening up the h file. He's taking quite a long pause, like he played pretty quickly for the whole game, and now he thinks, which is interesting. Okay, he takes, I'm going to take back, no other move, and I'm expecting him to go knight d7. Although, you shouldn't be shocked if your opponents, in case you're lower rated, like up to 1400, they may voluntarily give up the open file. That is another crime against chess, okay? You can just take and then probably infiltrate with the rook via h7 after. piling up pressure on these pawns, on these bad boys that are just sitting on these squares. You know, it's like you're in class and you're just being, you know, a good boy. You're not making noise so that the teacher is not going to ask about your homework. So this is exactly these pawns, but you know, we're going to start attacking them immediately if we can. And, okay, knight e7. Knight to d7, we have two moves. G6 is pretty much, I think, what I'm going to play, because it's very typical. Additionally, infiltrating is also to be considered. But I'm going to start g6 and I want to play rook h7 after. If, let's say, he goes f6 or f5. Okay, if he takes, big question. Feel free to pause the video here again. Big moment. What is the best way to recapture? Okay, people get that wrong all the time. You have no idea. Okay, e5 on the board. Before we continue to the game, one takes the best move, surprisingly perhaps for some of you, is to take with the queen. Okay, not taking with the knight hitting his rook, but with the queen, because it just turns out to be a deadly double attack. Okay, you're just winning a pawn basically for free. Now, you have to ask yourself, why is e5 not a good move? Or maybe it is. Or maybe it is and our play just doesn't make any sense. Now, the problem with e5 though, is that it's leaving his brother undefended. Completely. We could go knight d5 immediately, or we could go de. If this knight takes, we have queen f5. And most likely we will even take on f7 after. So on de5 it's better for him to take with the c knight, avoiding the check. However, when he takes with the c knight, we may have queen d5. Queen d5, knight c d5. Yeah, that looks pretty good too. We just have to kind of put these things in balance, like knight d5, ed. Honestly, everything feels pretty good. However, de with queen d5 or queen f5 check feels tiny bit stronger, just because I feel like we are a bit more active than in the previous line. So, okay, I have this check. Bit of an unpleasant surprise to my opponent. Bringing, you know, some uninvited guests to the party. So, okay, king d8. Now, before you go for the dopamine move, rook d5, that will hang. So you don't want to hang yourself, generally. Okay, gonna take on h8, and then still, I have rook d5. But because that's not running away, I'm gonna start by taking the free pawn. Okay, we're one square away from promotion. Starting to get a little bit nervous. Like you're holding hands with a girl for the first time. We're close to promotion. Probably, like usual, nothing will happen with that pawn, but it feels pretty nice, I guess. However, we will be able to kind of pick up the d5 pawn for sure and slowly grind him down in the endgame, it seems. Also, kind of like a fun fact, this knight cannot really move. If the knight, let's say, takes, it leaves knight g6 open, and yeah, attack the rook, promote, and well, in that case we may be able to get some action. So I think my opponent is close to collapsing. Yeah, this is definitely the moment where the pressure starts to add up, and yeah, queen b4. What a horrendous move. What is that actually meant to do? He has no threat. It's ridiculous. Okay, knight to d5. I can take with a rook. He has check though. I can play knight e6. Okay. Alright. Hold your horses. Okay, this is by far the most natural move. What is wrong with that? Okay, no, I know what he wants. He wants knight c4. That's what he wants, but it's just so slow. It's like hoping your opponent falls asleep during the game. not only falls asleep but also doesn't ever wake up again. That's how this move would work. Otherwise, you won't really get much counterplay with queen to b4. But yeah, I guess we're gonna take centralizing our knight, and well, we'll have to try and distract him with his with his pawn. It's kind of funny though. You cannot really keep the queen in the zone because the queen has to guard f8, meaning that queen has to stay on these two squares. However, queen c5 allows knight e6 and then we promote, while queen to d6 also should not really save him for long, according to all common sense rules of chess, I would say. Although I don't see the refutation immediately. Maybe knight b6. Knight b6 is interesting. Okay, queen to d6. How do we refute that? I have a feeling he won't play it, but how do we seal the deal? Yeah, knight b6, knight d7 is like a simple way. Oh, okay, knight to c4. That's kind of cute. He's resigned. Oh man, poor opponent. Point was that he hanged queen in yeah, last move, but
Besides whether I'm single or not, the second most frequent question that I get asked is, Alex Banzea, what the heck are we supposed to do against 1d4? So this is what the next game will be about.
Alright everybody, back with another game. Opponent starts with 1d4, meaning that you know what time it is. We're gonna be playing the King's Indian defense, or at least hopefully, because my opponent is already tanking. And he goes for the most standard reply, which I'm quite thrilled and yeah, excited about, because we may be actually getting an interesting game. Knight to c3 is the main move, preparing e4. They can also play other like positional stuff like j3, but so far so good. This is all theory, expecting e4. You can also opt for setups that play without e4 and focus on e3 move. It's kind of like different approach, but so far we do have the most classical thing on the board. In each position, you basically have two moves. You can castle or you can play d6. I usually like to start with d6, it's just a little bit more flexible. This may be a bit of a more advanced detail, but against some setups like h3, it makes sense in some variations to delay castling, and e5 right away is interesting because the endgame after takes and then queen d8 is actually pretty complicated. But okay, we do have bishop to g5, which is not super standard from this move order, and I think we're gonna castle. And basically my opponent can now play bishop e2, which is transposing back to a very popular setup, which is the so-called Makogonov, and here we go. Let me rephrase that. This is actually called the Averbach. I just got bamboozled a little bit between the names since white has 20 different lines to choose from. Okay, now, how do you deal with the Averbach? Well, apart, you know, the essential theory that you need to know, as a general rule of thumb, you want to stay away from the most typical King's Indian move, which is e5. Simply because, as a rule of thumb, with the bishop on g5, c5 works much better. Mainly because e5 just loses after de, queen d8, rook d8, and then knight e5, exploiting that pin, attacking both the knight and c7. So we have to play c5 when you see the bishop on g5, and you're very much expecting my opponent to push. Okay, that is very standard. Now that we have played c5, this is actually going to a pawn structure which is the so-called Benoni. Okay, yes, we are playing the King's Indian, but in order to be a successful King's Indian player, you need to kind of adapt to what your opponent plays. Okay, bishop g5, going to the Benoni. Other times, You may even want to have this idea of playing d5 in certain positions and then sacrifice the pawn in the Benko style. But for now, I'm just going to play e6, takes, and then rook e8. It's kind of very standard for this structure. And we're going to pretty much pick it up from there. I am pretty sure my opponent now has a choice between queen d2 or knight f3. It's quite interesting that the main way of playing for an advantage after, let's say, starting with queen d2 is to actually recapture with the e-pawn and keep it super symmetrical. But probably we're gonna get the standard, I was about to say Benoni after cd5 rook e8, but my opponent had something very interesting in mind. He took with a knight. Now, if you never seen something like this before, I do agree that it looks quite terrifying. However, I know for a fact this is not supposed to be great for my opponent. At first glance, maybe we can just develop knight c6, bishop e6, take. But maybe also throwing in rook e8 could be an interesting way to exploit the fact that he took on d5 with a knight. So I think we're going to start rook e8. We have to play a little bit aggressive. Because, okay, if my opponent would have enough time to, let's say, trade everything on f6 and then, let me highlight that better with the arrows. If he could somehow teleport this knight from f3 to c3, is much better just because he would have pressure on the backward pawn. Okay, the pawn is fixed by e4 and c4. And it's just a target thanks to the semi-open file that white has. However, he's not really gonna be in time with that. Or at least I'm hoping so. Because he can play knight c6, knight d4. Already it looks like we have some interesting activity. Bishop e6, bishop d5, followed by knight d4. Also seems to be a pretty typical and nice way to activate. Now the question is, shall we go bishop e6 and allow knight b3, or shall we do knight d4 first and then bishop e6? Because this way, if knight b3, I have also the extra option of taking his bishop and then taking on d5. So even though it's principle to develop the bishop, I feel like it's maybe now or never whether we get to play knight d4 or not. So I'm gonna try and make sure we hop on opportunity train right away before it's too late. So yeah, knight to d4. There we have f3 on the board. Bishop e6, like I promised. Not really much to do besides that. And okay, interesting moment for white. Will he allow us to take on d5? Basically force him recapture with a pawn, meaning that he's not going to be able to make any use of the d5 square anymore. Or will he take on f6, trying to still keep this open file against the backward pawn? But the catch of that is, okay, we have a very strong knight on d4 and he doesn't seem to have a convenient way of getting rid of it. And he chooses knight e3. Chooses the positional approach, like once again, give him time, plays knight b1, knight c3, the other knight hops into d5. I feel like maybe white would be in the driver's seat, but yeah, problem for my opponent is that we're also gonna make some moves. So I'm gonna start with h6. I feel like we have to do something about that bishop, otherwise it's not much we can really play for. h6 and then okay, bishop h4 expected, and maybe it's that kind of a position where we need to break the pin. g5, knight h5, try to play on the dark squares. On the other hand, we could also consider queen b6, which is unpinning, maybe threatening knight h5, knight f4, and also perhaps is not super easy for my opponent to defend on b2. Question mark. And this actually ends up being quite a complex game. I'm gonna go queen e6. It feels like typical, and I don't want to commit with g5 yet. Also, maybe knight d7, knight e5 could be another thing. Just keep an eye on. Expecting rook b1. I think b3, knight h5. This bishop is starting to, let's say, gain some speed. It gets a little bit more powerful now that my opponent weakens the diagonal. So for this reason, I am very much expecting rook b1. And then I think we are going to be going knight h5. And notice that he's unable to play g3. You know, trying to fill in the gap or the dam, let's say, filling the hole. But it will be g5. The bishop is trapped. So not very easy to stop knight f4. And yet again, strategically speaking, if my opponent could teleport this d2 knight to c3, he would have interesting position. However, I do feel like he is a little bit stuck. Or maybe he has a great move f4. I think f4 has to be tried, but on f4, you pause the video and find the fighting move. Okay, not sure if it's a good move, but it's a fighting move for sure. I think on f4 we have to go aggressive and take. And then go g5, hit the rook. Rook has to move or bishop has to take and win back the piece. What a complex game. However, after bishop d3 though, I feel like knight f4 should give us some interesting active play. Oh, there you go, g3. I am gonna take the free bishop and then I am gonna play g5. Why are you asking? Okay. I feel like knight f4 had a very clear idea. Turns out it was a bit more subtle than I expected it to be. Okay, he wants f5. We gotta stop that. And we have to speed up a little bit. Just because not much time left. 3 minutes for the rest of the game. But, of course, thanks to the extra piece, we should probably be in time to win this comfortably. And it's kind of a pity. Like, my opponent has played pretty sound and solid game this far. Until he just had like a stroke or something. I don't know, he just didn't see that I specifically moved the knight to a square where I was attacking his bishop, so such things may happen. And now I'm also about to pick up the house. His position is just collapsing like a sandcastle. Okay, rook e2, threatening mate, threatening queen f3 next as well. So, you won't really get out of this. Okay, strange. The opponent played pretty interesting in the opening, and then just immediately collapsed. I'm gonna pop the game review. We get like a 94, not too shabby.
Before we wrap up this video, I just wanted to say thank you. Only thanks to you guys we have managed to get course of the year for the 2nd year in a row. Thanks for voting me on the Karokan. This would be completely meaningless without you guys valuing it. And I just wanted to give you a quick update about the Jobava London course that I've been preparing for more than a year by now. So far, I think I've got the opening theory ready, and in the next month I'm gonna be focusing on the middle games chapters, and after that I think the course will be in a pretty good position to kind of come up with maybe an estimated time of release. So as vague as it may sound, that is kind of the situation that we have. It's difficult to like really predict in days and weeks, whatever, because it's a creative job. So stay tuned, and thanks for making this journey possible.